Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to a very early morning edition of Healthy Living Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and I'm so honored to have today's guest, somebody I've been trying to interview for several years, but he's so busy. I'm so honored that he took the time out of his busy schedule as a practicing medical doctor, none other than Dr. Tom Campbell. Now, you may know him as the co-author of the most influential book of this century when it comes to health and nutrition, The China Study, or the author of the Campbell Plan. But what you may not know is he recently became the medical director of the Weight Management and Lifestyle Center at the Highlands Hospital at the University of Rochester. And unless you've just crawled out of a rock, you might know that his father is Dr. T. Colin Campbell. So welcome, Dr. Campbell. Thank you so much for letting me talk to you today.
Thanks. It's my pleasure to finally connect.
I know. I'm so excited because honestly, you really are one of my favorite people in the plant-based movement. We're like two people that pass in the night. I hear you. We're a lot of the same conferences. You come in and out. And I love what you say because it's so in line with what I believe and teach. But the first question I've always wanted to ask you is like your father, you're a very humble person. But what does it feel like? I mean, you must be proud to have co-authored a book that has, before the movie Forks Over Knives, everyone that I ever talked to, especially medical doctors, when they adopted a plant-based diet, I said, why? It is because they read your book. So doesn't that feel good that you contributed that to the world?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think looking back on things, it's going to be one of the highlights of my life for sure. I don't think there's any way that'll ever not be true. So yeah, it's been it was a absolutely wonderful journey, and it's continued to affect my life quite dramatically ever since that book came out.
Wow. Did when you were writing, because I've written 2 books and you never really know, just like as a former actor, you never know if your work is going to be well received or booed. Did you have any idea, you or your father, that there was going to be what the New York Times called the Grand Prix of all epidemiological studies?
We had no idea. I mean, there was no marketing. None of the publishers wanted the book. There was just a small independent publisher in Dallas. We couldn't even get meetings with publishers because we had such a different book at the time. It was very rare and uncommon to reference a book, to put out a nutrition book without, recipes and menu plans and so forth. So, no, we thought we had a great book. We put together a great Microsoft Word document, after a few years. And I remember just being thrilled the first time I saw it with the galley copy, and it was sort of the binding that it looked like a book instead of a Microsoft Word document. And from there, it just took off. And no, we didn't anticipate that at all.
Well, I'm so happy.
I think that there's the lesson from that is that I think there's a lot of people out there who want health information that's a little deeper. They don't want just the 3-paragraph story about, losing 40 pounds in the next 2 weeks. They actually want to be healthy, and they want to know why you are saying the things you are. There are a lot more smarter people out there than what the media like to think.
Right. Well, I just interviewed a medical doctor a few weeks ago, and I always say, well, what brought you to the plant-based diet? And when it's a medical doctor or someone, of high, not to imply that people are lower intelligence, but somebody of that ilk, they always say because they read the China Study. So thank you so much. And I'm just so happy for all of your success. You and your family so deserve it. I think of you guys, well, I think of like the Campbells and the Esselstyn as like the first families of plant-based nutrition. So now were you an actor while you were working on that? Because you weren't yet a medical doctor at the time.
Yeah, I started some community theater in Ithaca.
Right. Was that your first love? Is that what you wanted to be originally, was an actor?
Yeah, I found a lot of creative expression in acting, and I'm kind of an introvert myself. So I think it was a real, a cathartic kind of experience, the being on the stage and the stage role and a creative experience. I loved it. Yeah, I loved it.
I'm sure you don't have time for it right now.
I don't. But I maybe in the future somehow I'll get back to it. I'd love to.
Did you gravitate more towards comedic roles or dramatic roles? I'm trying to think of how you were cast.
Whatever I could get. Everything from the star-crossed lover Romeo. To Greek tragedy, ripping your guts out, because you slept with your mom, and to the title character of the nerd, that sort of slapstick comedy. I mean, whatever I could get, I just had a great time with.
Gosh, I would love to see you in a play sometime. Did you ever do any improvisational comedy or stand-up?
I did not stand up. I did sort of short form, sort of game format improv, kind of like Whose Line Is It Anyway? I was in a little hole in the wall place in Chicago that I did.
Wow.
late night shows, BYOB,
Right.
people show up half drunk and get drunker.
That is my first love, and I just recently gotten back to it. Improvisational comedy. I apologize. My dog just had a bath, and she's absolutely going crazy. So, as a medical doctor, anything that you could take from your acting days that's helping you in your practice?
I think it's more the relationship aspect and the communication aspect. I think communication is one of those fundamental skills or fundamental practices that transcends different job titles, right? So, being able to write well, being able to communicate effectively, and also understand where people are coming from, what their point of view is. All of that stuff transcends job titles. And I think acting actually helped me with all of that stuff.
Wow. I would love to have you as my doctor. Can a regular person come to you? I mean, I know you're in Rochester, so it's not, if we live in California, it may not happen. But if there's somebody out there that is plant-based or wants to be plant-based or having a problem managing their weight, do you take patients?
I do, although in my current practice, I'm a board certified family physician, but I don't see people for primary care anymore. So I don't have ongoing primary care role with patients, but absolutely I see people for consultations regarding a variety of things, focused on, of course, as a specialist type of role on diet and lifestyle.
Right, and only in person. You're not doing any telemedicine like Skype or anything. Wow. Gosh. Yeah. I wish there were more of you, because I just imagine you would be just the most wonderful doctor to do. You literally sorry.
Maybe if you're such a strong imagination, maybe you shouldn't see me, because you see sometimes meeting people is like worse than the imagination, right?
Every time you have a new patient, do you literally hand them a copy of the China study or your other book, the Campbell Plan, or they don't really know who you are?
So I used to put out the Campbell Plan or the China study solution as part of the education, but I don't much anymore. People can get it, but I have other handouts and stuff that I give them. But yeah, I think one thing that's interesting, one thing you learn after sort of writing a book, and I don't know, you can attest this to what your experience has been, but if you give people a book, oftentimes the percentage of books read that are gifted is probably in the single digits. It's not. Usually people seek it out themselves, do better.
Right. You're right about that. And yeah, absolutely. I find that having audio helps, though. I mean, like my new book is on audio, and I find a lot of people in this day and age are so busy that they may not sit down and read a book, because I know for myself, the China study was such a difficult book that I bought it, but I also had to buy the audio and listen to it. Right. That really helped me.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So the one question, I want to talk about a few things you said at the last Remedy conference from the notes I took. But one thing I want to just ask you, because all the doctors that I interview, I ask, because one thing I'm seeing an increase of, whether somebody's plant-based or not, but just in the world, is stomach problems, specifically SIBO, IBS, and bloating. Do you see that in your practice? And do you have any idea why it seems to be on the rise?
I do see it, and the diagnosis of these things tends to be tricky. Oftentimes people worry about having them without necessarily having confirmatory testing, and sometimes there is no appropriate confirmatory testing. It can be a diagnosis of exclusion, essentially, where you just rule out all the bad stuff, but you're still left with symptoms, so you call it irritable bowel syndrome. Mm-hmm. So it's tricky on many levels, and I don't know why it may be increasing. I don't know that prevalence data, but it certainly seems to be more common. I don't know if it's that there's a brighter spotlight on those things, and so we've always had some abdominal problems, but now that there's a brighter spotlight on them, everybody thinks they have them.
Right.
Or it's truly increasing in prevalence. I don't know. I don't know. It's very tricky. Those are very tricky problems.
Right. What makes me concerned about it from a plant-based perspective is so many people that receive this diagnosis, because their gastroenterologists are not familiar with plant-based nutrition, they put them on these diets that don't include plant-based. They're basically, one of the ways they're treating it is with something called the specific carbohydrate diet, which is basically a bunch of meat and oil, like a keto diet. And that's why I'm so concerned about the increase in what seems to be the increase in the prevalence, is because the way it's being treated. And I only know 2 plant-based gastroenterologists, and they both specialize in pediatrics. That's why I was asking. But anyway, thanks. Yeah. So I went on your website for the weight management lifestyle program you run, and I want to read something from the website because I love it, because it's exactly what I teach and believe. And what it says is, whether you want to lose weight or just start a healthier lifestyle, a plant-based diet may be right for you. Truth is, it's right for everybody, but that's what it says. This is a program without calorie counting, calorie restriction, or carb counting. We strongly urge you to eat lots of food, to be full every time you eat, and to eat whenever you get even a little bit hungry. This is exactly what I believe, what I teach, yet it seems to elude most people. They'd rather go to these programs, pay lots of money that don't have a proven track record, it's early, and weigh and measure their food for the rest of their life, which is unsustainable. So talk a little bit about why this works, because people need to believe you can eat and grow thin.
Yeah, so it's the calorie density thing, which of course is been your thing for a long time. Eating more food with fewer calories per volume or per weight of food. And you can eat non-starchy vegetables. I break it down into non-starchy vegetables, fruits, and starchy vegetables as the categories. And you can have, and I have sort of a diagram of an optimal plate. And it's very similar. I saw after I made it, very similar to, I think, Jeff Novick and the McDougall thing, where half is sort of starchy vegetables, half is non-starchy vegetables. And then you can kind of play with that balance between starchy vegetables and non-starchy vegetables. A lot of people, when they start a plant-based diet, what I found in my practice, and I didn't appreciate this until I started working with a lot of people, is that when they go on a plant-based diet and they find the one-pot pastas, they find the healthier breads that are snacks, and they find rice and beans, and the one-pot rice and beans, and they have meals and snacks that are 100% starchy food, whether grain or starchy vegetable. And for many people, that is going to be a wonderful, healthy improvement. But for maximum weight loss, if you're not eating the non-starchy stuff and the vegetables, the weight loss can be a little pokey, or you reach a plateau before you want to. And so, I go through this thing where it's a balance between starchy vegetables and starchy foods, and the non-starchy fruits and vegetables for maximum weight loss. But really, if you're eating these things, if you eat a pound of rice and beans, it's somewhere 550 calories. That's a lot of food. And I do this whole demonstration with typical fast food or typical restaurant food. There's so many hidden calories in those things. You can get a sausage McMuffin with egg, or whatever egg McMuffin with sausage, whatever the heck it is, at McDonald's, and it's about 500 calories, and it's about the size of a hockey puck. Now,
right.
I don't know how many of you are the size of a hockey puck, but that's a couple bites. That's a few bites, and that's 500 calories. Or you could have a pound of rice and beans. That there's no. So it's very logical. It's just what the stumbling blocks is the taste stumbling blocks. It's our addiction to fat and sugar, and the social norms, that type of thing. But
right.
Absolutely, it's the calorie density. You can eat more and way less.
Right, exactly. Well, I love that, this is coming from a medical doctor, because I've been shouting calorie density from the rooftops for almost 10 years now. And the great thing is it works. You really can eat. I'm surprised that as a lean person, I eat so much more food now than I did when I was overweight or obese. And I don't worry. Like yesterday, I was on a TV show. I was on a shoot for 10 hours, and I ate 4 pounds of sweet potatoes. I needed it to fill me. And and of course I ate a lot of non-starchy vegetables too. But if you love to eat, calorie density really is king.
Right.
Yeah. So, we are such in alignment, Dr. Campbell, and I know you're so busy and it's so hard for you to get away. But if I ask you today, do you think in 16 months you could come to Las Vegas and speak at our annual Ultimate Weight Loss Conference? Because especially now with your new position, we're even more in alignment.
Oh yeah,
I'm asking you publicly so you can't say no.
We have to look at the details and stuff. I've been saying no to just about everything.
This is 16 months in the future, and it's Labor Day, and you bring your family, and
even if it's not a question of just scheduling, it's a question of you're just busying yourself like further in the future than you are.
Right. Well, so, I'm gonna take that as a maybe. So
the big thing is I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and I work so much and I don't get home and blah, blah.
No, I understand. I totally understand. So, and I really appreciate, that's why I even more so appreciate your time now. So at the last Remedy conference at Hilton Head, South Carolina, you gave a talk and I loved it. And I was taking notes on my phone and I was taking quotes down and I was posting them on my professional Facebook page with your name. And people were getting really upset because they didn't like some of the things you said, which are things that I say. But because I'm not a medical doctor, people actually argue with me about them. So I have these 3 little points. And one of the things you said, and I tried to write it down word for word because I'm in complete agreement. You said, alcohol causes cancer in every part of the body it touches.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable if you think about it that way, right? I mean, your mouth, your oral cavity, your throat, I should probably modify and say excess alcohol is associated with cancer at every point in the body it touches. But your mouth, your throat, potentially stomach. That's not as clear, but potentially stomach. People generally don't get a lot of cancer in their small intestine, but their large intestine and rectum, they sure do. And alcohol causes cancer there. And then it's metabolized, and it can cause liver cancer. It can cause breast cancer. So just think about that. Think about if I made you a liquid, that you were going to drink. And I said, but if you drink too much, it might cause cancer every place that, it's going to come into contact with. Most people would say, hell no, I don't want that stuff, and people have to realize that I think alcohol is not a health food. There's all this cardiovascular conversation is a little bit trickier, but I think if anybody's drinking more than a drink at a social, assuming they have no alcohol use problems, if they're drinking a drink at a weekly social thing, dinner out or whatever, fine. But you start getting anything regular or more than that, I don't think people should go there.
Yeah, I find that where, how do we define excess? Because I personally find that most people that drink pretty much every day, or at least want to, and have difficulty not drinking every day. But that's a whole nother discussion. But thank you for saying that and not being just like, oh yeah, it's fine. I appreciate your honesty. So at the conference, somebody asked you a question about nuts, because we're told by certain doctors that they're like, we know that they're healthy, but they make it sound like they're imperative, that if we don't eat this ounce of nuts every day, we'll like literally drop dead immediately. Yeah. And so you were saying, and I love the way you're so reasonable. Like I'm sure your wife loves you. You seem like you'd be like the best. You seem like you'd be the best father and husband. You just seem so calm and reasonable. You remind me of your father, actually. But you said that something could be good from a health perspective, but from a behavioral one, a real problem.
Yeah,
I love that.
Well, we have nuts available now in these giant plastic jugs and plastic bottles that with salt, maybe even a little added oil to them. And we have blenders where you can turn nuts into salad dressings. I mean, none of that is natural. Right. I mean, if you were going to be gathering nuts from the tree that where the nuts fall down once a year, and you can gather the nuts and roast them or whatever, that's great. I mean, there's probably a lot of health benefits, but I call them loophole foods, the nuts and the dried fruits, in particular, nuts and dried fruits, they're loophole foods. And it's when people are, and I'm asking people to give up the meat, cheese, and added fats and that rich taste that they know and love, that they have probably some biochemical addiction to. And they start eating this way. They start looking at all the recipes and stuff online, and they realize that they can make some very rich sauce or creamy thing, or cupcake icing or whatever, by blending up some cashews. And then, man, that's really good, and everybody really likes that. That's the loophole. Right now, it's a whole plant food. It's a loophole, and they can really derail weight loss. It hampers people's ability to change it hampers people's taste bud change that needs to happen, and food preference change that needs to happen if you're always snacking on something rich like nuts. So there's a behavioral element. It's very hard to eat 8 almonds. You might measure out 8 almonds and do a great job every work day, and then on the weekend there's still that case of almonds, that bag of almonds in the cupboard, and there's going to be one of those weekends where you go in and you get a few handfuls, and suddenly there goes however many hundreds of calories. So I think the nuts are it's a complicated thing, because yes, they probably are healthy, and if you reach an ideal weight and you want to add some nuts, I have no problem with that. Or if people are some people I see actually want to gain weight or lose weight too easily, and I say, well, eat more nuts, because they probably are quite healthy. But from a behavioral point of view, these loophole foods can present big problems.
Thank you. I love I learned something new. I love calling them loophole foods.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I can't speak. I'm not used to this time. So you do believe in food addiction then? Because a lot of the doctors, plant-based, are not kind of poo-poo it, but it sounds to me like you really do believe that certain foods are.
Addiction is that, there's a whole academic literature about whether you can be addicted to things, or whether it's a real addiction or not addiction, what qualifies as addiction and what's not. And I'm going to kind of stay out of that conversation as to, what formally is addiction. But I do find that the addiction model in terms of counseling patients is useful, because I have no doubt that, I talk to so many people who, they just don't quite feel satisfied at some point during the day, when they're early on in the transition, after dinner. Maybe it's in the evening, maybe it's in front of TV, maybe it's in the afternoon or something. They just don't quite feel satisfied, or they just want a little something more. And you look at all the research on addiction, and it's mostly animal research, but you look at all the research, and it's correlated with some human research that very clearly there's biochemistry here that's very similar to addiction-like behavior. And so using an addiction model to counsel people, and it can be very, very useful.
Wow, thank you so much. Now, you mentioned the scenario about the person that might be able to eat 8 almonds every day and then maybe go hog wild on the weekend. This brings me to the third quote that I took from you, from the Remedy Conference. In my program, the Ultimate Weight Loss Program, I've been saying for years that the environment is critical to your success, that if it's in your house, it's in your mouth. And all of the experts I've interviewed, like Dr. Doug Lisle, says we have to work harder on the environment than we do ourselves. Dr. Carrie Saunders says if you hang out in a barber shop, it's just a matter of time till you get a haircut. You phrased it this way, and I took so much heat from posting this because people got so mad at me. You said, if you have temptation in your environment, you will fail.
Yeah. I think you look at some of the research on willpower, and I was introduced to some of these ideas through Doug Lisle, and then reading some of the literature and some of the books on willpower. If you look at the way our body practices self-regulation, so how do we regulate ourselves? It turns out that I don't really think that we're these sort of conscious creatures of magnificence that so many people think that we are. We think we're the humans, and we have these massive frontal lobes, and we can do what we want to, and it's just whether we're strong or weak or good or bad. And all of that is nonsense. It's all nonsense. We're piles of biochemistry, obviously. That's maybe a little extreme, but we're influenced by biochemistry in the same way that a rat is influenced by biochemistry. And we know from willpower, for example, that your blood sugar level, your relative blood sugar level, has a pretty stark influence on your willpower and ability to resist temptation and self-regulate yourself. And if you have, and every time you resist temptation, So if you have that bag of chips on the counter and the bag of chips is your thing and you always want it, but you pass it and you think, I did great. I'm for a week, I haven't had any, it's great. But the bag of chips is still there. Every time you pass that bag of chips, you're still using up a little bit of your bank of willpower. I mean, some of the research on willpower suggests willpower is kind of like a bank account that you use up from different things equally. So if you are using up your willpower, I guarantee you at some point in the future, whether it's in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, in a month, or 2 months, if you still have that bag of chips there on your counter, you're going to get to that bag of chips where your willpower tank is at empty. And you're going to eat the bag of chips. And, and then you can rebound and life goes on and you can be fine. But for many people, that's a struggle. It becomes a never-ending struggle, and it's one that they can't consistently win.
Right. Oh my God. So you say what I think beautifully. I just love it. It's so true because I heard that willpower could last as long, we have as much maybe as 20 minutes of a reserve, whether or not we're going to eat something. But like you say, you don't need willpower to not eat something that isn't there. So to me, it's a no-brainer. I love the way you say it. I know you have to give.
Yeah, the people who have the most success long term. And so we talk about the initial change. Of course, in the initial change, you have to have willpower, but because you're changing your tastes and you're trying new things and you're forcing your new habits and more time at the grocery store and blah, blah, blah. So that all takes willpower. But the faster you can get to a point where you don't need any willpower, in research studies that look at people who are rated as sort of strong-willed, people who are rated as having good willpower, it turns out that they actually are, what they do is they put themselves in environments, they construct their environments where they don't need willpower.
Right.
In fact, they may not even have stronger willpower. They may have worse willpower.
Right.
Because they're not even needing to use it.
Exactly.
So they're not using that muscle in that sort of analogy. They're not using that muscle because they don't have the temptation around them. So in fact, their willpower may be even worse. And I say that same thing myself. People sort of wonder sometimes, oh, are you perfect? Are you what is your eating perfect? And I say, no, I'm human just like everyone else. And if I'm at something and there's a plate of cookies and maybe they're a little bit healthier or something, I do the same rationalizations as everyone. Oh, I'll have a little bit. Oh, it's so good. I'll have another little bit. Oh, it's so good. It's Christmas. I'll have a few more. And I swear to God, I feel like my willpower in some ways is probably worse. It's probably worse than some people's. But my environment, and that's why it's so difficult, I think, for folks who have split households where other people in the house are not eating the same. I think that's probably the number one most environment that people have.
Absolutely. People say to me, Dr. Campbell, oh, you have so much willpower. You're so diligent. And I'm like, no, the only thing that's perfect about me is my environment, because that's the only thing I can control.
Right.
Oh, that's terrific. I know you have to get back to work, but if you have just time for one more quick question or to add anything that we haven't covered, to my knowledge, you've never been overweight and your family doesn't appear to be overweight. So why did you get interested in this particular type of work as a medical doctor?
Well, I'm interested in, quite frankly, it's such a pressing problem. There's a scary kind of stat that just came out earlier this year in the New England Journal. A predictive model suggested that of children alive today in the U.S., almost 60% are going to be obese by the age of 35. And just about the same time that headline came out, there was another headline from the Southern Community Cohort Study finding that of tens of thousands of people, that of obese individuals in that population, the majority of them, so some number greater than 50%, the majority of them will have full-blown diabetes within 20 years. And you start putting these statistics together, looking at diabetes, heart disease, obesity-related cancers, and this is a tsunami that people tend to think of the weight gain trend as sort of like past tense to present. Like we think, oh, the trend has been for the past 30 years up and up and up. But actually, all the indications are that we're just in the middle of a rising wave of a tsunami that's going to really cripple our system. We can have all these conversations about who's going to pay our health care. Is it the government? Is it the institution? Is it insurance? Is it going to be individuals? Is it employers? Is it some combination of both? And quite frankly, I don't see how. I just came across a paper. The average cost of an American diabetic is almost $17,000 a year. And you start putting these numbers together, and the rise in costs, the rise in obesity, the rise in diabetes, no one is going to be able to pay that bill. I don't care what health. No one is going to be able to pay that bill without massive detriment to other things in society. So, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily more enamored with weight loss and obesity than other types of health or medicine, but that's just sort of where the action is. I guess you could. I mean, that's the need, right. and people are interested in weight loss. So
absolutely,
that is. But really, I'm excited about using food to treat diabetes and heart disease and other chronic diseases.
Nice. Well, I thank you so much for your time. Is there anything in the last couple of seconds or minutes that you'd want to add, or just that you didn't say that you'd like to say to our audience?
No, nothing in particular. It's great to always great to talk to you, Chef AJ.
It's so great. I hope our paths cross again, because you're just a joy to talk to. And thank you so much, Dr. Campbell, for your time. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Healthy Living Live. I'm Chef AJ, and I make healthy taste delicious.
Thanks.